I love the way God moves in different parts of the service. Today's reading was actually at the beginning of the Baptist World Aid video, or a part of it. So we're reading from Isaiah chapter 8, starting at verse 21 and going through to chapter 9, verse 7. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this.
Well, hello, and good to be with you. I'm Brian Harris, if you don't know who I am, serves as the pastor at large here at Carey. And today, looking at the topic of Jesus, the light of the world. Jesus, the light of the world, a wonderful Christmas theme. I don't know if you thought much about light, being able to see, but initially I trained as a social worker. And while I was busy with my training, we went out and I was placed at an organization that worked amongst former criminals, helping them to kind of find their way back into society. And there was a legendary social worker there, Herb was his name. And Herb was remarkable for many things. He had initially trained to be a lawyer, had a law degree, worked as a lawyer for a while, then decided he wanted to study social work, had got a social work degree. What was remarkable about that was that Herb was blind. He had managed both working as a lawyer and being a social worker as a completely blind person. And he said that actually not being able to see gave certain advantages. He said that because he couldn't see, it meant that he listened very, very carefully. And he heard things that maybe other people didn't hear. And he said that it had trained his memory because though he could record things and replay them back later, it was just so much better to remember and to kind of retain things when you actually heard them. So he said he had a great memory and he listened really well because he had no sight. And indeed, he managed it very, very effectively. He had been working for this particular social welfare organization for many, many years, done a fantastic job there. And really, the only kind of accommodation we needed to make was that people said to us, listen, just leave things where you find them. Because like for Herb, like if you just move something in the middle or move a chair or something, then he doesn't see that, and that's awkward. It makes it more difficult for him to find things. So just put things back in good orderly positions. And that was pretty much the only accommodation we needed to make for him. And we kind of just thought that he was like just a really, really good social worker, getting on with his job, and like there were no special allowances made. But one day, Herb was alone in the office, and he was on a phone call. And he was very excited during the phone call because it was with a client and was one of those, like there's some conversations that just change things. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those conversations where you realize, actually, this conversation is making a difference. Actually, I think that there's a light that's turning on here. I think something's actually happening. And he was in one of those conversations with a client, and at the end of that, he was absolutely ecstatic. And he leapt out of his desk, and he just rushed through the door, just saying, yes, 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 but he had not seen that his door, which was always open, there'd been some kind of a draft in the office or whatever, and it had partially shut. And as he just rushed, he just collided absolutely with it, and he knocked himself out, and he was hospitalized for a few days. In the end, he was okay, but there was just this extraordinary sober sense that came over the office after that, as we thought that everything was fine, and it really didn't matter that you couldn't see. But we've just actually seen that sometimes actually it's a huge disadvantage, and that was an awful thing to have happened to you. Not being able to see, not having light. It's one of the themes of the Bible that we need light, we need to be able to see. And it's one of the themes of Christmas, that actually the coming of Jesus is about this great light that comes into the world. And I want just to think a little bit of this passage here, which Helen read to us, and which was also a marvelous part of actually the Baptist World Aid video as well. This passage in Isaiah chapter 9, and its context. Let's remember what its context is. So Isaiah is prophesying, and he's prophesying at a time where actually Israel had been divided into a northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And for the northern kingdom, its day was pretty much done. And the year Isaiah was prophesying around about the year 700. In the year 722, the Assyrians had come and they had conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. It never recovered again. And in that conquest, the first of the two nations, because there were the 10 tribes which made up the northern kingdom, Naphtali and Zebulun, were in the far north. And they were the first two tribes that fell when the Assyrians came. And so they had this kind of ignominy that as we were defeated, we were the first to go down. We were the first who were conquered. We were the people who actually heralded that a great darkness and a great sadness was coming into the land. And as Isaiah, as he prophesies, he's aware of conquered Zebulun, the loss of the northern kingdom. It's only just taken place. And there's this reeling sense of what has happened to us. There's just Judah, the southern kingdom, that's actually left. And he prophesies a day when that will all change. And he says this, and listen to the prophecy again. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations. And Galilee kind of encompasses both Nebulun and Zebulun. So those two areas, that's part of Galilee. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. And so Isaiah's little prophecy that though people looked at Naphtali, Zebulun and thought, oh my goodness, that's the most disastrous of all places, this was the place from which Messiah would grow up. Because Jesus, of course, grows up in Nazareth in Galilee, and it's in that area that Messiah actually comes from. And I mean, actually, the prophecies about the coming of the Messiah are quite remarkable in Scripture. You might know that it's Micah, and Micah chapter 2 tells us that Jesus is going to be born in Bethlehem, again, hundreds of years before Jesus is actually born. Micah writes, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you were small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." And so as you go to the prophecies in Scripture, you get there, Micah chapter 5, verse 2. Where's Messiah going to be born? He's going to be born in Bethlehem. Where's he going to grow up? He's going to grow up in that disgraced place that seems to be in such darkness, Nebulun, in that area over there. He's going to be the Galilean who comes from Nazareth. That's where Messiah is going to come from. And what will it seem like? It will seem like this great light that comes out of darkness for the people walking in darkness will see a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. So in what way is Jesus the light of the world? And what does it mean when we say Jesus is the light of the world? I mean, let's remember this is a title that Jesus claimed for himself. John chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And then very provocatively, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Like, have you ever thought through that fine tension there? Jesus, I am the light of the world. No, actually, you are the light of the world. Or is it actually because I am the light of the world and because you live in me, you become light for the world as well? It's extraordinarily challenging. So when we look at this image of Jesus as the light of the world, or the coming of this great light that comes, it helps us to see things properly. We need to remember that actually the challenge is Jesus is the light of the world, and he says, so come along, you be light for the world as well. Now, it's nice to say that Jesus is the light for the world, but let's remember that light can sometimes be a slightly disturbing thing. I don't know if you've ever been, maybe you've had a party or whatever. I can remember at our own home once we had a number of people around, and we had it was when our kids were younger, and lots of people had come. And there was this mood lighting. And with this soft mood lighting, everything looked just beautiful and wonderfully conversational and really nice. And if you looked at our home, you'd say, what a beautiful, amazing home with this great ambience and great atmosphere and everything else. But then the event finished. And naturally, I was onto the cleaning team and having to help tidy up. And you switch on the lights, and when the lights are on brightly, you suddenly see, oh my goodness, in that dimness, all those murky little marks were there, all this kind of faded stuff's there, all these things that you like when it's dim, it doesn't look like that, you don't see it, but when you turn the light on brightly, you suddenly notice things that otherwise are hidden. Have you ever had that experience? And when we're told that Jesus is the light that comes into the world, on the one hand, that's a very beautiful and a wonderful thing. But it is actually the reminder that you're going to see some things that you otherwise don't really see. And that actually when things come to the light of day, it's often an invitation to change in some way. So think of the way in which Jesus brought light to many different situations. It's John chapter 4. Jesus is with a woman at a well. And they're talking about, where people should worship. And it's like a fairly philosophical conversation. She's a Samaritan. She wonders if people should worship on the mountain, or Jesus, surely because he's Jewish, would say that they should worship in the temple at Jerusalem. And Jesus actually says, well, it doesn't really matter where you worship. What matters is that you worship in spirit and in truth. But then he turns the focus into her and he says, and what about you? Where's your husband? Because he knows that she's had 5 husbands and is living with someone who isn't her husband. And he starts to turn light into her life and to say, but come along, away from this theory now. What's gone wrong with you? What isn't working for you? What needs to change for you? Or it's John chapter 5. And there's a man, and he's been lame for 38 years. And he's been lying at the pool of Siloam. And he's been asking for people to put him into the water when it stirs, because apparently if you get to the water first, then you get healed. But he's never been first. In 38 years, he's never been the one who's got to the water first. And then Jesus comes to him one day and asks this amazing question. Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? You'd say, what a stupid question. Duh, of course I want to be healed. No. Do you really want to be healed? 38 years, haven't you got comfortable here? Isn't it easier to live with excuses? Isn't it easier to live with charity? Do you actually want to stand up, pick up your mat? Do you really want to walk? I'm inviting you to do that. But here the light is. This is what your life is going to be like. Do you want that? It's a better life, but there is a challenge in it. And in fact, the man picks up his mat and he walks in, and it's the Sabbath day. And what happens immediately? The Pharisees come and say, why are you working on the Sabbath day? And he's straight into opposition. It's it's in some ways it's easier just to stay there in the dark. But do you want to be healed? Do you want to come to the light? Jesus is light for the world, and that's wonderful. It's wonderful if you're willing to look at what you see and to face what you see and potentially to change in the light of what you see. Jesus comes as light to us. And as he does, it really depends on, do I want to change? Am I willing to change? And sometimes he helps that to happen because he helps us to just see things very differently. Think of the things that people were struggling with. I told you, the man at the pool of Siloam, the first thing he gets challenged with is, why are you carrying your mat on the Sabbath day? You're working on the Sabbath. I mean, Jesus bumped into all these rules about the Sabbath over and over again. But then the light he brings to it and the way in which he changes that, he says, hold on. Like in Mark 2:27, he says, you think that the Sabbath day, that somehow you were made for the Sabbath day. You've got it wrong. The Sabbath day was made for you. Don't you see? It isn't about you bowing down and worshiping the Sabbath and doing things that you have to do in the Sabbath day. The Sabbath is given to you as a gift. I mean, that's light, isn't it? That's seeing things in a completely different way. I mean, up until that time, if you were Jewish, and I've mentioned this, some of you would have heard me say this before, the Sabbath day rules were so strict that if it was the Sabbath day and someone dropped down in front of you, and it looked as though they were maybe having a heart attack or something, you faced a real dilemma. Your dilemma was this: should I help or should I not help? And the ruling of the Jewish rulers at that time, of the Pharisees, was, if you think you can save the person's life, then intervene. Like if you think you've got a fighting chance of saving this life, then do something about it. Try and help this person. Because it is more important to save a life than simply to keep the Sabbath rules. So they had a hierarchy of priority. If, however, you look at someone and you say, yeah, you're already pretty blue. No, I don't think that I'm going to succeed. The chances is really quite small. Then you have sinned if you try to help, because you're acting presumptuously and you're breaking the Sabbath law when you probably are not going to be successful at all. And you must actually stop and you must do nothing. You must say, well, tough, they can pick up the corpse tomorrow. I mean, it doesn't, like it's as strict as that. Like the Sabbath law is there and you bow down and you worship it. And then in the light of Jesus comes and he says, hold on, you're seeing that in quite the wrong way. I mean, how about you see it not as Sabbath as being this heavy burden, but as God's gift to make sure that you get enough rest and to make sure that you get enough renewal and to make sure that life can begin all over again. We see things differently in the light of Jesus. One of the interesting things that I had to learn soon after I got married, and Rosemary and I have now been married for 42 years, but one of the things that she would say to me quite often in the early years of our marriage was I would be looking for something and I would not be able to find it. Let's just say I was looking for my blue socks. And I'd be there at the cupboard and I'd be searching for my blue socks. And I'd say, Rosemary, where are the blue socks? And she would say, they're there, just look for them. And I'd say, I am looking for them. And she would say, well, stop looking like a man, look like a woman. And I would say, a little sexist, don't you think, my dear? And she would say, no, just stop looking like a man, look like a woman. And I would say, look like a woman, okay. Looking like a woman. Like, I mean, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do here at this particular point in time, but I'd stand, and they would not be there. I mean, they would simply not be there. And then I'd say, sorry, I give up. Like, oh, woman of the house, come find the blue socks. And she would come, and she would just walk up, and she'd say, there they are. And I'd say, oh, how did you see those? And she'd say, because I look like a woman, not like a man. And I would try to unpack what she meant by that. And I would think, what does that actually mean? And why could she see them? And why couldn't I see them? And over the years, I came to realize that I do look like a man. Like, oh, sorry if that's sexist. Maybe, like, you can disassociate with that comment. But I think what she meant was I look with assumptions. Like, I mean, mere mortal that I am, mere man that I am, I assume that if you're looking for socks, they will be in the sock drawer. I mean, that's a reasonable assumption, is it not? Like, socks go in the sock drawer. That's the place for them. Apparently, if you're a woman, you don't make such assumptions. Like when you look, you actually recognize, yes, socks go in the sock drawer, but it could just be that they have kind of slipped in with the underwear. Or it could just be that they've slipped between some T-shirts or something like that. And so when I look for socks, I look, there's the sock drawer, 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 and she comes and she looks like, there's the wardrobe. Where's it gone wrong? There they are. They've gotten with the underwear, and she can see them. Like, see, the ones looking with assumptions, the others looking with a wide gaze. And I think that's actually what Jesus quite often does for us. He says, like you looking with assumptions, like you look at the Sabbath day, and you assume that God is some kind of a killjoy, And you assume that all these Sabbath rules are about how can life be as burdensome as possible? Like, should I help that person who's dying? No, they're probably going to die anyway. Like I looked like that with those assumptions. Like, change your assumptions. See differently. This is the light that I'm giving to you. And in the light of these changed assumptions, start to realize that everything comes from God as gift. And when you recognize that everything comes from God as gift, then the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Like when you realize that actually God's love is astonishing, like God, you thought that God was this oppressive figure that was like this killjoy. Like when you stop seeing that way and you open your eyes, you see in a whole, fresh, new way. And that's what Isaiah is saying. Like we have felt as though we are under the judgment of God. And suddenly we realize that from this most disgraced place, the land of Naphtali, the land of Zebulun, that's where Messiah actually grows up. And this little town of Bethlehem, that's where Messiah is actually born. And all these places that seem too dark and too impossible, great good can come from there. And Messiah comes and he brings light to the world. And I wonder what it means to start to see things in the light of Jesus. Because the invitation of Christmas is to say, or to hear Jesus saying to us, I am the light of the world. I bring light. Now you be the light of the world. You be the light of the world. A little while ago, Rosemary and I were walking along a path. We were just out for a walk. And it was a shared path, a shared cyclist and pedestrian path. And like on those paths, I think the rule is like you're supposed to keep to the left when you're walking. And the trouble was that the left-hand side of the path was very sunny, but the right-hand side was fairly shady. So we kind of drifted over, started to walk on the right-hand side of the path because it had more shade. And that was fine because there was absolutely no one on the path at all. And then in the distance, we saw that there was the cyclist heading towards us. And so we thought, well, fair enough. Like, he's coming towards us. He must be on his left-hand side, which is the shady side. So we moved over and we went back into the sunshine side of the lane. But apparently not quite quick enough for the cyclist, because even though he was a fair distance off, as he kind of shot past us, he kind of yelled at us, "Some people are so selfish, unbelievable." And like he was really annoyed that we had been on his side of the path for this very short period of time. And I don't know how you respond when you suddenly attacked like that, or when people like yell at you and you think like, I haven't done anything wrong, we're only on that side of the path for a very short period of time, didn't really do anything to you. Like, I mean, do you feel like sort of defensive or angry, or how do you respond? I surprised myself a little bit. I didn't, for once in my life, I didn't feel all defensive, or I didn't feel all angry back. I just looked at this man who had been yelling at us because, like, I don't really know why, but we'd been on his side of the path for some minute few seconds. And I thought, that's a pretty extreme reaction. Like, that's a pretty extreme reaction. And I thought, I wonder if you're okay. Like, I mean, mortgage rates are going up, and maybe you're stressed out about that, and maybe you lost your job over COVID, or maybe it's just been too difficult, like all the stress in the world with the Ukraine war and all kinds of things happening. I just wonder, I hope you're okay. Like, I mean, I didn't get a chance to talk to him, and I don't know, but instead of being angry with him, I found myself just praying. I'm praying, Lord, I hope, please help that man. Like, he's just so angry, and something's gone wrong, and just intervene in his life. And I think that that's to see people in the light of Jesus. And as the light of the world, and Jesus is the light of the world, and we called to be the light of the world, we're also called to see people in the light of Jesus. To see, like, your impossible neighbor who's always angry. To see you are made in the image of God. And God does love you, but something's gone wrong. And maybe I could love you out of that and show the love of God to you. To see the person who's just, like, impossible, but it's because they haven't yet seen the great light of the love of God. Or maybe it is because they're so ashamed of the things that have happened in the darkness that they're afraid of the light. And they think that if they come to the light and those things are seen, then they just feel devastated because people would know what it is that they've actually done. They'd feel, no, I'm too ashamed for that. And why not feel compassion there? And why not say, actually, God calls you to the light that actually good can come. and that life can come. And maybe it's not about doing that for someone else. Maybe it's about doing that for yourself. I mean, maybe you find the darkness more comfortable because you feel just so awkward about things that have happened. And maybe Jesus is saying, I am the light. And yes, sometimes in the light you see some things that are a little awkward, but don't be afraid, because I've come to bring great joy and great light and great hope and great forgiveness. For those who dwell in darkness, Christmas comes and says a great light has dawned. Let's pray together. Who do you need to see a little bit differently in the light of Jesus? Now, you've just written them off, but now see them in the light of Jesus. And what's it that you're holding on to in the dark because you just feel awkward and embarrassed and ashamed? The light of Jesus is to forgive and to reorientate you and to give you a new hope and a new start. Never to condemn, always to bring hope. Jesus said, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." O light of the world, we come to you. Look deeply into every corner of our lives. Transform them. O light of the world, help us to see well. Help us to heal well. Help us to love others well. Amen.